Christina Applegate, a name so many of us have grown up hearing and admiring, has recently shared a deeply personal and emotional update that's touched the hearts of many. Known for her iconic role in Married, with Children, and later as one of the leads in the acclaimed dark comedy Dead to Me, Christina has become more than just a face on screen. She's become a symbol of resilience, courage, and authenticity, especially in the face of overwhelming personal adversity. Over the past few years, she has been quietly fighting an invisible battle, one against the life-altering illness multiple sclerosis, or MS, and now, amidst that ongoing struggle, she's been dealt yet another heartbreaking blow. This week, during an episode of her podcast Messy, which she co-hosts with fellow actress and MS warrior Jamie-Lynn Sigler, Christina revealed through tears that her beloved father Robert Bobby Applegate has passed away. He was 82 years old. The gravity of this loss became evident immediately as Christina broke down emotionally on the podcast while speaking with their guest, actress Joanna Garcia Swisher. It wasn't just the words that were spoken, it was the rawness, the unfiltered sorrow in her voice, the kind that stops you in your tracks. Christina, now 53, shared that her father had passed about a week prior to their recording session. But in a moment that many who've lost someone will understand all too well, she admitted this was the first time she had actually allowed herself to cry. For a full week, she had held it in, compartmentalized it, perhaps as a coping mechanism, or maybe because when you're already dealing with a relentless disease like MS, sometimes you just don't have room for another kind of pain. "We knew he was going to die," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Is that an excuse for not feeling?" Question hung heavy in the air, rhetorical but deeply poignant. Christina was not just expressing grief. She was inviting her listeners into that complicated gray area of anticipatory loss, where the heart begins mourning long before death arrives. "Because you kind of know that someone's going to go and you've said your goodbyes," she said, almost trying to rationalize her delayed reaction, as if she needed permission to finally feel. Grief doesn't follow a script. There's no timeline, no linear path through the haze. And in Christina's case, that grief is layered, intertwined with the physical, emotional, and mental fatigue that comes with MS. Joanna Garcia Swisher, in response, shared her own experience with the death of a parent, admitting that it threw her into an odd, unfamiliar place emotionally. It's these quiet, vulnerable exchanges between women who've seen life from its brightest and darkest angles that give Messy its name and its power. And in that moment, it was clear, this wasn't just a podcast episode. It was a sacred space where pain could be acknowledged, named, and held with compassion. For Christina, the conversation triggered more than just tears for her father. It was also a subtle reminder of how intertwined her life has been with struggle these past few years. Her journey with MS didn't begin with the official diagnosis in 2021. Looking back, Christina realized the signs had been there long before. And as it turns out, one of the earliest, most telling signs occurred right in front of the cameras while filming the pilot episode of Dead to Me. During that episode, her character Jen Harding was supposed to run across a field. What should have been a simple scene for a seasoned actress like Christina turned into something unnerving. She fell. Not in a dramatic, scripted way, but suddenly and inexplicably. At the time, she chalked it up to exhaustion, perhaps dehydration, or just the wear and tear of a long day on set. But in hindsight, it was her body's first quiet cry for help. "I remember falling that day," Christina recalled during another podcast episode with Dead to Me director Liz Feldman. "Hi, first sign of MS. So, not to bring everybody down, but there I was." Liz, in turn, remembered the moment vividly. She said she had noticed Christina losing her balance more than once during the pilot shoot, but given that they had been filming for more than 14 or 15 hours straight, it didn't seem out of the ordinary. Fatigue was expected, clumsiness forgivable. But now both women saw it for what it was, the quiet beginning of something life-changing. When Christina finally received her diagnosis of multiple sclerosis in 2021, the pieces began to fall into place. The fatigue, the imbalance, the tingling, suddenly they weren't random symptoms. They were clues, breadcrumbs leading her to an answer she never asked for. MS is a chronic illness that affects the central nervous system, disrupting communication between the brain and body. For those diagnosed, every movement, every decision, even the simplest tasks can become a struggle. It's a cruel disease, not just because of what it takes physically, but because of what it slowly strips away emotionally. Independence, confidence, spontaneity, and in Christina's case, her ability to fully embody the roles she once tackled with ease. Yet, despite the personal cost, Christina didn't let MS stop her from completing the final season of Dead to Me. She could have walked away. No one would have blamed her. But instead, she chose to use the show as a vessel, a cathartic experience, even if that meant exposing her vulnerability to the entire world. She opened up about this during a deeply moving appearance on The Kelly Clarkson Show in December 2022. The beauty of Dead to Me is that it gave me almost this weird platform of dealing with it, she said. And deal with it she did, on camera, in character, and in real life. I didn't have to be on all the time, and I didn't have to make all the jokes. I could fall apart in a scene. That breakdown? It wasn't always acting. It was Christina, raw and unfiltered, allowing her truth to bleed through the script. It was like me. It was my soul actually falling apart, unfortunately, in front of the world, but it was cathartic in a beautiful way. How do you keep going when your body no longer feels like your own? How do you laugh when your muscles ache, when your limbs feel like sandbags, when your future feels uncertain? For Christina, the answer seems to be, you keep showing up. You keep speaking. You keep connecting. And now, after losing her father, Christina faces yet another emotional mountain to climb. Bobby Applegate wasn't just a dad. He was someone who helped shape her world. And while he might have been in his 80s, a parent's death always lands like a thunderclap, no matter how old you are or how expected it may be. The world shifts. A chapter closes. And for Christina, that closing is happening in the middle of a storm she's already been weathering. What makes Christina's story all the more moving is the way she's allowed herself to be seen, not just as a celebrity, not just as an actress, but as a human being. There is no filter on her grief, no polish on her pain. She speaks like someone who knows that vulnerability is not weakness, but a powerful act of defiance. And in doing so, she's given countless others the permission to feel their own pain, to speak their truth, to cry when they've been holding it in for too long. Even in her darkest moments, Christina has found a way to keep the light on, for herself and for others. Whether it's through her podcast Messy, where she and Jamie-Lynn Sigler tackle everything from illness to motherhood to friendship, or through her interviews where she confronts the reality of living with MS head-on, Christina continues to inspire. Not because she's trying to be inspirational, but because she's simply being real. And maybe that's what we need more of, especially now, in a world that often celebrates perfection while hiding pain. Christina Applegate is far from perfect. She's tired. She's hurting. She's grieving. But she's also showing up. And that in itself is a kind of heroism. Losing a parent is never easy. It doesn't matter how prepared you think you are. The finality of death hits differently. It leaves behind echoes of laughter, of lessons, of regrets, of conversations that will never happen again. For Christina, Bobby's death may take time to fully process. But in that moment on Messy, when the tears finally came, it was clear that her healing had begun. Not because she was over the loss, not because she had figured out how to move on, but because she had given herself the space to feel. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from Christina's story, not just about illness or fame or grief, but about being human. We're all walking through something. We're all carrying things we don't talk about. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that we're hurting.